Alright y'all, welcome back to Combat Arms channel. So today I'm going to be doing a little more of a story time kind of video. So I'm going to be explaining why I switched from the Marines to the Army. Now I get this question a bunch, like even now in the Army I get the question, I don't know, I'd say at least once a month, but yeah. It's a question that a lot of people ask. I guess a lot of people are interested. Why would a US Marine want to leave the US Marine Corps and switch over to the US Army? So I'll go over a little bit of background as to what made me make that specific decision and how I actually feel about everything, especially I've been in the Army now for a little over, wow, yeah, it's been 3 years in the Army already, so it's pretty crazy to think about, but yeah, I don't know. I would say my time in the Army has flown by a lot quicker than my time in the Marines, but yeah, so I'll explain everything sort of step by step. So overall, my time in the Marines was amazing. I can't really complain too much. You are sort of biased depending on what branch you start off with, just because you're sort of raised up in that branch. And each branch sort of values different things a little bit. As far as like the Marine Corps, they're all about discipline and professionalism and, well, not so much professionalism, but discipline and appearance is a big thing in the Marines. Physical fitness, of course, is a big one. In the Air Force, it's more of intellect and maturity. In the Navy, it's really experience and, upper enlisted. There's a lot of pressure and praise, I guess, on the upper enlisted. So that's a little bit unbalanced, I would say. The Navy really loves their chiefs, I would say that. Now in the Army loves people with Ranger tabs. That's a big thing. But I think if you put forth the effort in general, you'll do pretty well in the Army. Now, something I noticed, as you start climbing the rank ladder in the Army, there's a lot more pressure put on you, so to speak. And I would say overall the Army's pretty balanced as far as, the lower enlisted doing a lot and the upper enlisted doing a lot. But sometimes you can get put in a position where you're doing a bunch of different duties and it can be a little much. But yeah, overall my time in the Marines was awesome. Again, I really learned how to be disciplined. I learned how to be an adult because, I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17. I went to boot camp right after I turned 18. It was actually 2 weeks after... Ooh. You guys can't tell, again, it's still raining. But yeah, if you guys hear that, I apologize. But yeah, I did join the Marine Corps when I was 17, and I shipped to boot camp about a week after I turned 18. So it was a lot. I didn't really know how to be an adult. I didn't have a job before I joined the military, so I really learned a lot in the Marine Corps. I learned how to really talk to people. I learned how to get out of my comfort zone. That's a big thing that was hard for me. Just being in my comfort zone. Whenever people learn something or they get familiar with something, they like to stick around in that certain field or what have you. But for me, I like stepping out of my comfort zone because it's something that I know that I definitely needed because I didn't really do it a lot growing up, especially in high school. I didn't join any sports or any teams or anything. So the Marine Corps was a great opportunity for me to step out of my comfort zone, basically. I did learn how to be physically fit. I was pretty motivated to be physically fit before I joined, but I really learned how to really drive that home and keep that pressure as far as maintaining a good physical fitness. So the Marine Corps definitely showed me how to do that, but it was a lot of self-motivation. So I think in general the Marine Corps is pretty good with motivating you to push through, especially if you're like slightly injured or you're just feeling a little bit weak. The Marine Corps is pretty good about pushing that mental barrier. But I think in general, physical fitness is a big self-motivating sort of thing. But I have a lot of great memories. Some of my best friends I met in the Marine Corps, and they're still my friends today. And, I got to go to a lot of cool training, which was very awesome. When you picture the military, you think of like certain things, whether you think of paratroopers or you think of infantry or you think of, someone rappelling or what have you. You have a certain idea, and I was able to do a lot of the cool training that I was planning on doing, and a lot of the cool stuff that I saw as I was joining the military, stuff that I really wanted to do. So that was cool that I was able to actually do that. But there is a certain structure to the Marine Corps, and it's a certain structure with every branch depending on what job you're actually in. But there is a certain structure and a certain path that's really like laid out before you. In the Marine Corps, it's a lot smaller. The bases are smaller. There's not a whole lot of bases, so there's not a whole lot of places you can go to, and there's not as many opportunities as there would be in other branches. Now I would say in the infantry, in the Marine infantry, you have a lot of options, but not nearly as much as in the Army infantry. So I was able to do a lot. So I was able to, experience different things. I had 3 MOSs in the Marines. So I had 0311, which is infantry rifleman. I had 8152, which is like your basic security guard when I was guarding nukes. And then I also have 8154, which is the close quarter battle team member when I was on the recapture tactics team. So I had options for sure, but there's a certain structure, especially when you reach sergeant. You have to go to you get HISTed basically, and what that means is you either get to go to be a combat instructor or a recruiter or a drill instructor. You have to go and do this because it's like a broadening assignment. So it's something that they force you to do. And when you're an E5 in the Marine Corps and they're already forcing you to do something like that, you just get comfortable doing your job when you're a sergeant and whatnot. You get comfortable and proficient, but then they force you to do something else, and it really knocks you out of that flow. And it is good. Again, it does knock you out of your comfort zone, but at the same time, it's not beneficial career-wise, especially if you're trying to stay in that particular job field. Now, if you are picking up rank, it's good to go to certain things, go be an instructor at an educational facility or whatnot. Teach the corporal's course or the sergeant's course. Be able to learn how to be an instructor and how to talk to people and teach them certain things. So that's a good thing. But being a drill instructor, being a recruiter, it's a weird thing. It's a step in the wrong direction, in my opinion. Drill instructor is fine, but it brainwashes you again, because when you go through boot camp, you get brainwashed, and then with a recruiter, you learn this public speaking and whatnot, and you learn how to speak with people and interact with people. But it's not the same way, because when you're a recruiter, you're like a salesman. You're just very deceitful, and it's a weird thing. It's not really what you want to be when you're talking to people normally. It's not a good way to build relationships or friendships, with a ruse or trying to be deceitful. So it's good and it's also bad. So there's like the shadow side of everything. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. Now, a lot of the reasons why people leave the Marine Corps or the military in general is because there's crappy leadership. Now, I will say that's, it sucks. It's crappy to have crappy leaders who don't care about you and who are in it for themselves. But there are going to be crappy leaders wherever you are, regardless. Either they're going to be a leader or they're going to be a boss. Regardless, there's going to be crappy people all over the place telling you what to do. So it's just something you need to do. You need to build the resiliency to move past that and just, I wouldn't say suffer or endure. You should definitely do what you can to, mitigate that as much as possible. But it's better because once you start becoming a leader, you can really mitigate a lot of that stuff for your subordinates. Like, you sort of become that buffer for all the nonsense coming down on them. And, they really do appreciate it when you've been, growing up in the military and there haven't been leaders who are able to do that or willing to do that. Whenever you become that leader and you're willing to buffer some of that crap from your subordinates, then they really do appreciate it, and it goes a long way. You can see them really, they definitely appreciate it and they recognize what you're doing. So that's a very cool thing. But in the Marine Corps, it's not necessarily a Marine Corps specific thing. The Marine Corps, I think it's a little bit harder to keep some of that, because the Marine Corps is very focused on standards, and they want everyone to be a specific way. And if you deviate from that like a little bit, then they notice that, and there's a spotlight on you. So if you have a certain way of doing things or like deflecting certain things away from your guys, then they'll start to see that, and then they'll have it out for you. So it's kind of weird. It can get very, I don't know, I wouldn't say biased. It can get very personal sometimes in the Marine Corps, is what I've seen. And it's kind of weird, but it is what it is. You need to be that leader to be able to not be a yes man and, stand up whenever you really need to. Now, in the Marine Corps, I did get to deploy, so that was cool. A lot of times people will go a very long time or even an entire contract without deploying. And that's another big reason why people get out. And in the Marine Corps, deployments are pretty frequent. However, they're just not the same, because in the Marine Corps, deployments are shorter and there's a bunch of different missions that you would get. In the Army, that's where you have a lot of people, because it's more of like an occupational force. That's where you see more people going to like Iraq, Afghanistan, and staying there for like 12 months. So there's more probability for them to do stuff. My deployments were cool. It's just I didn't feel like I was making that big of a difference in reality. So the deployment wasn't a huge factor with me leaving or getting out leaving the Marine Corps or staying in. It wasn't really a huge factor. It's just one of those things that definitely affects people's decision whether to stay in or get out. Now I did have a 5-year contract, and of course when you're lower enlisted, time just goes by so much slower because you don't necessarily know what's going on. So you're always trying to figure it out. When you're more senior and you generally know what's going on and you know the job, then it's very easy for you to wrap your mind around certain things, and you can predict things as they're coming. But when you're lower enlisted, it's a lot harder to sort of picture that. So time definitely felt like it was going a lot slower because I was learning what I was trying to do, and I was also just learning how to be an adult in general. So I don't know, it was pretty nice to sort of again jump out of my comfort zone, but it definitely weighed on me because 5 years doesn't seem like too bad, but it was dragging out for sure. So when I was getting up to my 5-year mark, I was really trying to make a decision. It was definitely a hard decision for me to make because it's not easy for you to go into a job and then get out of it when that's the only job you've ever known and that's the only thing that you're really good at. I could have done other things. I'm good at arts. I'm physically fit. There's a bunch of options you can do with that. You have to be motivated to do certain things, and I wasn't really motivated to do anything, but I did know how to be an infantryman, so that was a big reason for why I wanted to stay in. But a big reason why I didn't want to stay in is because you can see I have a bunch of tattoos. Now, these tattoos all got grandfathered, which basically means when the policy changed, I was able to, keep my tattoos, and I wouldn't be against the regulation, so to speak. So it wouldn't be as negative of a thing. However, they were limiting my options, so I wasn't able to be the instructor I wanted to be. I wanted to be a close quarter battle instructor in Virginia, but that wasn't an option. And the monitor, which is basically the person that decides where you're going next, what duty station you're going next, and he didn't really appreciate that I had tattoos because I had a discussion with him and I was trying to go be a CQB instructor in Virginia, and he just wasn't trying to allow that. And it was very hard for me to do anything. I couldn't be a drill instructor. I couldn't be a recruiter. I'm not even sure if I was able to be a combat instructor just based off of me having tattoos. And though they were grandfathered in and it was good, there was nothing derogatory, it definitely cast a shadow over me. And I'm like, it's tattoos. And the Marine Corps is so focused on their appearance that it really gets in the way of the mission, and it really kicks people out because people get very turned off when they're being told that they're a crappy leader or they're a crappy Marine just based off of having tattoos and having a certain body image. Even though they could have been the most physically fit person and tactically proficient and whatnot, if they have tattoos, it's like a very negative stigma, which is completely the wrong move in my opinion. So that was a big reason for pushing me out. Now in the Army, you have way more options. So originally I was actually going to join the Coast Guard. I think about 4 or 5 months before getting out of the Marines, that's when I made my decision. So pretty short timing, but I made the decision that I would be getting out just because I didn't have many options left in the Marine Corps, at least options that I wanted, And if you're not going to be happy in your job, then it's better to do something that you're going to be happy with, something that you have a little more control over. So I was going to join the Coast Guard. They said I needed to redo the ASVAB, which is like the knowledge test you take when you're joining. So I ended up doing that anyway. I increased my score by a lot, which was surprising. So that was nice. I had a lot more options as far as jobs just based off of that. But I think maybe, I don't know, it's maybe like 2 months or even a month prior to going on my terminal leave when I was getting out of the Marine Corps. I decided that I would just join the Army. And the reason for that is the Coast Guard is awesome, but there's not a whole lot of jobs, so there's not a whole lot of opportunities, and it would be completely stepping out of my comfort zone. And I would also have been demoted from an E5 because I was a sergeant in the Marines. I would have been demoted from an E5 to an E3, so I'd have to climb up that ladder again, and I just wasn't trying to do that. I think it was a pretty poor decision for them to be doing that with prior enlisted and people who have experience being a leader. So I decided I would join the Army and I would just do infantry again because my body is still feeling pretty good. It wasn't totally worn down being in the infantry for 5 years. So I decided to do infantry in the Army. Now, infantry in the Army has way more options as far as where you get stationed, what schools you can go to, what advanced training you can get. There's just a whole lot more options in the Army, especially in the infantry. And in the infantry, in the Army infantry, those guys get promoted above, non-combat MOSs. In the Marine Corps, infantry gets promoted last. So me getting sergeant in 4 years in the Marines was like a crazy thing and doesn't happen to a lot of people. But yeah, picking up rank in the Marine Corps infantry is much harder unless you're very solid. Now, another thing that really turned me off with the Marine Corps is I didn't really feel like I was getting the recognition that I deserved because I feel like I was a pretty solid Marine. I would always put forth the efforts. I was physically fit, so that wasn't an issue. I cared about my job, and I invested in my dudes especially, and I was really devoted to them. But the leadership didn't really give me the options that I wanted, and they didn't really give me the power or influence that I wanted to make sure that their career development was as solid as it could have been. So that was a big thing that turned me off, and it's kind of a bad reason to leave the Marine Corps just based off of that. But I wasn't really helping, basically. Long story short, I wasn't really helping at that point, so I decided to get out for that reason as well. Now, the cool thing with Army infantry is I was able to keep my rank, so I was going to be a sergeant in the Marines, and I was going to be a sergeant in the Army, which is the same thing. It's an E5. Now, in the Army, a sergeant doesn't mean as much as a sergeant in the Marines. A sergeant in the Marines is more of like a senior, almost like a senior NCO. Not really a senior NCO, but really experienced. And in the Army, a sergeant is basically like when you become an NCO. It's very junior, so there's not a whole lot of responsibility placed on Army sergeants, which I wasn't too worried about. You'll get there eventually, but I was able to keep my rank, so that was nice. I also didn't have to go through Army basic training, because I have the experience in the infantry, so it translates over pretty well. Basically, what I had to do was get out of the Marine Corps completely, just because, I don't know, it's like impossible to switch branches while you're in. So I had to get out of the Marine Corps, go through MEPS again, which is like the enlistment processing station, go through MEPS again, and then I got orders to my first Army unit, which is very weird because I didn't have any Army uniforms, obviously. So I had to go to my unit in civilian attire with all my household goods, and I just showed up, and I'm like, hey, I'm in the Army. Can I have a room? What do I do with uniforms? It took me 2 months to get paid, which was a struggle. And I think it also took me about a month, maybe like a month and a half to actually get a uniform. So I was just that dude walking around in civilian attire. And it was kind of funny, but it was very weird and it was very odd. And it was also a scary thing because I was in a completely different environment because, I was supposed to be on the East Coast like I had been my entire career. I was in Louisiana now. I was in Fort Polk. And I didn't really hear the stories about Fort Polk, before getting there. So I didn't know how barren that actual city was and the area surrounding Fort Polk. It's very boring, but you can make the most of it, I guess. But it was very hard for me to adjust. So I wouldn't say I was depressed. I felt very lost. Now, something that did help me out is I had buddies, or I had a buddy in the Army who joined about the same time as I did, who was in the Marines prior. Now, he had been out for about 2 years, but he was coming back into the military. So it was cool being able to connect to someone. He didn't have uniforms either, so he was going through the same struggles. We were in the same platoon, I think, or at least in the same company for a little bit. Actually, we were in the same company for the whole time, but we were in the same platoon for a little bit. But it was really cool meeting him and talking about the Marine Corps again because we had this shared experience. In the Army, I didn't really have any friends. I didn't know anybody. And I didn't have any of these shared experiences because I didn't grow up the same. And again, in the Marine Corps, everyone's a hard ass coming from the Marines. So that's how they're pictured. So people didn't really want to approach me because Marines aren't as approachable as other people might be because they're more serious, I guess. But so there was that. I had to get past that. And it wasn't too bad. I would say it took me about 6 months to get back on my feet, which, wasn't too bad, honestly. But I was a squad leader again, so that was nice, actually having dudes under me. and I feel like I had a little more influence. I had a little more leeway as far as, allowing me to influence their careers a little bit better. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I think I had pretty decent leadership. Like my platoon sergeant was pretty good about, doing what needed to be done, and not really too much else. He was very strict, which was, it is what it is, but he was more understandable when I was like, okay, maybe we can do it like this, or maybe we don't need to do this. But yeah, I think that helped out. It really helped, build a relationship between me and my junior soldiers, and that was very cool to see. It was cool to see them actually get motivated and inspired to do their job and get passionate about being in the infantry. Because a lot of times people in the Army infantry don't really get that mindset. They don't really have that passion for being an infantryman. And it means a whole lot to be an infantryman, to actually be the one who's going out and fighting for your country. You have people who are in the military all the time saying, yeah, I'm going to fight for my country, but they're like a cook or water purification or, communications. It is what it is. If you like doing what you're doing, that's fine. But infantrymen is really the dudes on the front lines doing what they need to do. And it takes a lot to step into those shoes. So it's cool to see people actually get passionate about that. Now, I'd say almost immediately in the Army, I could see how much better the Army was with their training. Now, in the Marine Corps, training is very off the wall. It's very rough and it's very gritty, and you just sort of jump into the middle of it. And the logistics aren't as smoothed out as they were in the Army. Even in the Marine Corps, you have your armory, which is where you draw your weapons from before going out into the field. You have your armory, but it's a different building than your actual company area. So you have to go over there, you have to stage over there, you have to wait for this other unit to come and get their transportation. But in the Army, the transportation is run by the people in the company. And the arms room, which is the armory in the Army, the arms room is in your company area. So you wouldn't have to show up super early. You can stage in the company area, so you could do planning and armory draw at the same time. And it really allows you to, check your dudes, check their equipment, do some last minute planning to make sure that everything is smoothed out, as opposed to jumping from the armory back to the company area and just running around, being super tired. And again, the people in the Army company are responsible for the transportation a lot of times. You have your own vehicles, so it's not so much of a struggle getting out to the field. And that's something that every Marine dreads. It's such a pain in the butt just to get out to the training. The training itself is going to be rough, but when it's rough just to get out there, it's very demoralizing for sure. So it's very cool that was a little bit better. And then in the Army, I got to do so much cool training, like right off the bat. I went to do the Army Expeditionary Warrior Experiment, where we're trying out a bunch of new technology. So we have like new thermals, new like night vision systems that link to the weapon. There's a bunch of drones. We had the Black Hornet, we had quadcopters, and we were working with the Scots. And it is very cool to immediately be working with other units from other countries, and not even in a deployed environment, because in the Marines, that's the only time that we ever worked with our allies, is when we were deployed. So it's very cool just to go and do this training with this new equipment with like this Scottish regiment. So that was very awesome. That was a whole lot of fun to be a part of. I got to do the Tunnel Rat School, or the Subterranean Combat Course. And then I also went to XCTC, which is basically like assisting the National Guard in their training.
All right. Last three hold back zone. Or last hold back zone.
And that was an experience. That was very miserable, but it was a very strange experience. Just sort of having that shared misery with my subordinates and whatnot. And yeah, there was also a big training accident during that, which will be another story time later on. But yeah, it was very cool. I got to do a lot of cool training, and the training was much more realistic. In the Army infantry, you actually maneuver, on the enemy. In the Marine Corps, oh man, in the Marine Corps, it's so dumb. I hated this so much. So there would be like a bunker or something. There'd be like a trench that you have to assault, maybe like a hill or an obstacle, and you basically just get all these squads, like an entire company. You get them online, and they just bound up like it's a World War I. Like you're running through a field, you're running up, you're getting down, you're shooting. They don't teach you to shoot and move like so much. You're not getting up and shooting. You're just running. It's like physical fitness training. It's not even like really good like tactical training. You're just getting online and you're bounding towards the enemy. I'm like, this makes no sense, and you would never use this tactic when you're actually deployed. So, yeah, that was very hard. But in the Army, you're really doing maneuvering. You're using cover and concealment to push up on the enemy, and there wasn't a whole lot of that in the Marines, which was very shocking. Now, in the Marines, there's a whole lot more violence. The equipment was honestly a little bit better in the Marines, just because it's smaller and the infantry is more focused on than most Army units. But yeah, overall the training wasn't that great. I got to do a lot of cool training in the Marines because I was volunteered a lot. I volunteered myself, and at the same time, people trusted me to go and do training for the unit, so that was cool. But in the Army, just the general soldier gets some pretty decent training, so that was very cool to see, and very encouraging, especially for the younger soldiers, for the future of the military. It was encouraging to see them actually care about their training and get some solid training that they actually needed. Now, overall in the Army, again, the sergeants aren't what sergeants are in the Marines. Army sergeants are junior NCOs. That, like, plain and simple, they still don't really have a whole. They're not necessarily the instructor. In the Marine Corps, the sergeants are like the teachers. The corporals are the NCOs who are running stuff. The sergeants are the one who are running stuff at the same time, but they're really teaching. In the Army, sergeants are people who are learning how to lead, really. They're not really teaching as well as they could be, just because they don't have the experience, because you rank up a lot faster. So there's a big difference in the leadership, but it wasn't really too big of a deal. I was more buddies with the staff sergeants than anything, and just the more senior sergeants in the Army. But the quality of soldier was not as good, or the quality of warfighter was not as good in the Army, just because there was a big mindset, especially at least in the unit that I was in. There's a big mindset that you can get like an injury or what have you, and the Army cares about treating those injuries. So you get what's called a profile, which basically means that you can't do certain things, you can't carry this much weight or run this far. So it allows people to get that profile and avoid training, and that's what a lot of people were trying to do. Just because even though they had 3-year contract, which isn't a lot, they didn't want to do the training. They didn't care about being in the infantry. It wasn't necessarily people in my squad, though we did have an issue with it, just because once a lot of people are on profile, you have to move people around, and you don't have the same camaraderie, or I guess the same fluidity with the unit, just because it's people working under different leaders, and it's a different leadership style. So there was a big issue with that, just because we had so many people out of the fight. So that was a big thing that I didn't appreciate in the Army. And again, the equipment just wasn't as good as it was in the Marine Corps, which is kind of a shame, especially for the infantry and the Army infantry making the bulk of our war fighting force. It's kind of a pain in the butt to see that, especially the body armor. It's just the worst thing in the Army. Good grief. The IOTV is the worst invention ever. I don't know who decided to fund that contract, or even to fund the pattern. The UCP pattern is just pathetic, and I don't know how they got that contract, but that's a completely different story, I guess. But yeah, in the Army, I did have more options for sure. So we actually had the battalion reconnaissance platoon, and I tried out for that. And the tryout was not as bad as it was when I was joining the Marine Corps recapture tactics team. It was actually nowhere near as bad, but it was very cool to see people motivated to joining a certain unit and actually trying out for it. So it was cool being around people who cared about something enough to try out and challenge themselves. You know, it's awesome to see people challenge themselves, because when they do that and they get through like a certain selection and they get into a specific unit, then you can really see that they actually care. And it's nice because you can really build off of that and really get the training going when people actually care. And again, the unit was a little bit smaller because it's a reconnaissance platoon. I think we had about 13 guys at the most, but it was 13 of the best dudes, the best infantrymen in the battalion went into that platoon basically. So it was very cool to have, you know, that close-knit group. I ended up being the platoon sergeant of that platoon, which was a very awesome experience for me. It really opened my eyes as to, you know, what the bigger picture was. Just being in reconnaissance, it opened your eyes up to that. But at the same time, you know, I was a platoon sergeant and I was also the platoon leader or the platoon commander. So I was in an officer and a senior NCO position as a staff sergeant, because at this point I got staff sergeant. I actually got staff sergeant in about a year and a half, so not bad. But I was in these positions as a staff sergeant, and it required me to learn a lot, but it also allowed me to really influence my guys even more, because I was the one making the decisions for them. A lot of people didn't really understand what the reconnaissance platoon did, so I was able to influence that. I was able to be like, okay, well, maybe we should just do it like this, and I think it'd be better if we do it like this. And people would just be like, yeah, okay, sounds good. We'll trust you. I had a lot of solid dudes help me out and you know, get me to learn the reconnaissance job. But it was awesome being able to influence you know, my subordinates a little bit more, just because I was in a position like that. So that was very awesome. So yeah, I guess that's basically why I switched over from the Marines to the Army, and what my experience has been like early on in the Army. Now again, I have been in the Army for 3 years now. I've been a staff sergeant for a little bit, so I'm definitely getting a bit better appreciation for what the Army is like and how the Army does certain things. Now there are certain nuances obviously between each branch, but overall it's not too hard to learn, I would say, especially when you get a little more mature and professional. You get to it's just a little bit easier to catch on to things, I guess. But yeah, that's my experience thus far. So if you guys have any other questions, or if you have any specific details or stories you'd like me to tell, definitely feel free to leave that in the comments section. But yeah, I don't know what the next little story time will be, so I guess it all depends on what you guys are asking in the comment section. But yeah, I'm pretty open for anything. I will do a little Q&A when I'm at 100,000 subscribers. So that'll be pretty cool. And yeah, you guys can ask some questions during that. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about the video. That's pretty much my journey going from the Marines to Army. Not too crazy. I'm sort of over it now. It was a big shock initially, but I'm sort of over it now. But definitely let me know what you guys think. If you like the video, feel free to hit that thumbs up. But yeah, consider subscribing, especially if you like my little story times. You can hit the bell and, you know, get notified whenever I upload the next video or do my next little story time. But yeah, that's it for this video. So I'll see y'all in the next one.